Yeah, we're live now, and I will let everyone in. We'll fill up the room. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Pure Presence Book Study. The Perfume of Silence is the book we're looking at right now, Francis Lucille. And, let me turn that down. Yeah. Turn that off. Forget to catch that. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our weekly book study, and we're so happy to have you. My name is Bill Free, if you're here new, and Jenny Beal is our co-host. Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Bill. Hi, everyone.
It's so good to be with you each week. I look forward to this every week, and man, this Perfume of Silence book. I'm so happy that we decided to space it out over a long period of time, because the content of what Francis answers with. I mean, it's very simple. Of course, I can't do what he does, at least not yet. And he gives such simple answers to really great questions, questions that we all have, I think. This week, we're looking at chapter 2, There is no there. There is no there. That reminds me, Jenny, of a chapter that, or a line in the text of A Course in Miracles that says, God has no name. I like
Yes,
that,
I
right?
remember that one. Yes.
Yeah. God has no name. And
Yes.
there is no there.
Mm.
There's only here, or there's only now. And Rupert would even say that even using the word moment is a concession.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
So Jenny, where would you, we're starting for you all that have the book. It's on page 23. I'm not sure where it is in Kindle, but the title is There Is No There. And the first question for this chapter 2 is, very little seems to be said about emotions in this approach. And we'll look at this chapter 2 up to about page 30, I guess page 30, and see how we go from there. And please, if you have any questions, type in questions in the chat, and or raise your hand if you would like to ask the question, or something and speak it. That would be fine too. We'll go with that. We'll start the questions at about 12:30. So if you have any questions, just formulate them, put them in the chat board, and we'll take them in the order that they show up. Jenny, what do you think about this chapter 2, and which page would you like to start on?
Well, let's start at the beginning, because the chapter starts with 3 questions about emotions, and I think that's quite an important topic for all of us. So if we start there, and when people talk about emotions, and often there's suffering associated with emotions, then they almost always refer back to something in the past. Situations that have arisen in their childhood, an unhappy childhood perhaps, difficulties in a marriage, maybe a former marriage. And those are all sorts of things that are discussed in psychotherapy when people are trying to get over the problems that they feel have been caused by the past. But in this teaching, we completely ignore anything to do with anyone's past history, the story of their lives, and we just deal with what is the case now. So it's a different approach. And Francis says we just stay with the current story, the present situation, without interpretation or interference. And this takes us naturally upstream to the source. And at the end of the story, we don't need to tell the story. We simply note the absence of a storyteller. So it's not about trying to get rid of feelings or trying to get rid of ego. Even when we see that feelings are egoic, they revolve around a separate self. We don't try to get rid of them. He says we have to be careful of any approach in which we feel we have to get rid of something. The one who has eliminated the problem is the continuation of the problem.
Right. Yeah, this reminds me of the idea that, and I like what you brought up, that in psychotherapy, when or psychological sort of investigation, a lot of times the therapist will want to go into the past to correct the to try to correct the experience that you're having based on a childhood trauma, could be another marriage, whatever. And often it's a total witch hunt. You know, you go in, and maybe you'll find something, some residue, some kind of an event that that is healed, but often you just stay in the story and you do investigation that goes nowhere. So I like this approach, and then when you meet people on the spiritual path, some like A Course in Miracles, I've heard many teachers say and tell their audience, well, that's spiritual bypassing. And I love Rupert's answer to that. He goes, yes, this is spiritual bypassing, and I quite like that approach, because it's bypassing all of the stuff that's unnecessary, going, staying rooted in the imperturbable I am presence, the beingness, and allowing that, it just shines a light on this experience. It's kind of like a self inquiry, inquiry without words. It's a shining on the experience. It's a much more direct path. And now I call myself definitely a spiritual bypasser.
Yes, it's bypassing the concept of a separate self, because it's only a separate self that can have a story and a history.
Yeah.
That what we truly are is present only now. It's here and it's now. And that's really what he means by saying we need to go back to the source. Instead of looking at history, looking at the separate self, we go back to the source.
Yeah. Yeah, and also there's another idea that I like to sort of take the wrapper off of, and that is the idea that we're letting something go. These are teachings that I used to subscribe to, is letting things go, and I've heard many course students say, I'm still healing, still working on it, and letting it go, and that's another little subtle little trap, that we think that we have to do something to remove something, instead of just allowing it to be, the body mind to be lived, and be the witness of that.
Yes, things that are not needed disappear on their own, by their own volition, once you have understood and seen clearly. So it's really all about seeing clearly, and it's that eventually dissolves anything that's not needed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and also there's this piece on this first page, this first paragraph that we don't need to go into the story. You know, you can tell that if someone's going into the story, they're going back to the problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Just,
Yes. Exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, that was, I mean, if there's any other comments on page 23 or the first page of this chapter 2, you can, if you have any questions, you can type them in the board. Let's see. Susan said, through, what happens though before one, what happens though before one has seen clearly?
Well, that's really what this teaching is about. That we have to look at the situation in order to see clearly. So the way he's describing it here is that we go upstream to the source of what we really are, and it's in the process of going upstream that we do see clearly. So that going upstream, what that really involves is asking, well, whenever we land on an object, then we ask, what is it that is perceiving that object? If we take the thought I and we land on the body mind, we ask, well, what is it that is perceiving the body? What is it that is perceiving the mind? And then it gets a little bit more subtle, because then we feel that, well, there's something, there's a collection of memories, and that's the past history. There's a collection of things that I'm good at, and all of these are what I am. And again, we go back and we ask the question, well, what is it that knows about all of that? What is it that perceives all of that? And every time we take a little step back, we work our way upstream, and then ultimately, then we do see clearly what it is we are, and that seeing clearly, when that happens, we've arrived at something that's entirely neutral. It's devoid of feelings. It's devoid of description as well.
Yeah, it really, I mean, once understanding comes in, at first, I mean, I had this conversation with Susan this morning. At first, you have glimpses of presence. You have glimpses of I am, of the self that reveals itself so clearly that there's no denying it. It's just the absolute truth revealing itself. And then you go back and you try to understand what happened, and that that seems to be a process. It doesn't happen instantaneously to most people. Even Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie, once they had that awakening experience, they had to go back and discover what it was that happened. And in this situation, in the situation of following Francis or Rupert or Jean Klein or A Course in Miracles or Ramana Nisargadatta, one of the great teachers, you have to come to the place of understanding so the mind relaxes its fixed uh, position sufficiently to be open to not knowing anything, for something new to be uh, to come in, and then that understanding is just, it reveals itself as this calm presence that's not, it's this, your peace is not disturbed from there. And where I think Leon said, so in the case that you do not, I guess, remove the thorn for the thorn, I think you still do. I think often we use, there are ideas in place where where tools are helpful and available to remove something, and then pretty soon that thing that you was used, that mantra or practice or just an idea, suggestion, uh, is no longer necessary because now you're sufficiently living in the true self, in the true state of presence.
Yes, I think once you have seen it once, then it's always open to you to go back to it, and there are different ways of going back. That walking upstream to the source, then that's quite a meticulous process, which inevitably takes you there. You can't really fail with that. It might not take you to a wonderful feeling. And this is really the danger of when people have had a very sudden, um, mind-blowing experience of their true nature. They are wanting to get back to that pleasant feeling because they conceptualize awareness as being that. And of course it isn't. I think Rupert once says it's much safer if it's approached just very gently through a series of glimpses, and after the first liberating glimpse, when you've seen that you are not a body and not a mind, not all of these thoughts and memories or anything objective, and then seen your infiniteness. Once that's seen, which is really not too difficult, and probably most of us here have seen that at one time or another, even if only for a few seconds, then you're always able to go back there. There's never a problem. And then in time, there's no need to use any methods or any walking back upstream. It's just instant. You're just Francis and John Klein talk about being invited, and you're just invited back to your true self, and you're there in a flash. It's there's no need for anything else, but it's really separating it out from whatever wonderful experiences we've had in the past, and knowing that that's not it. Those wonderful experiences are not it. What it is what you look at when you're not totally overwhelmed by all that wonder.
Yeah. Yeah, it is remarkable when you find that you're beginning to experience a different default,
Yes, yes,
a new a calmness, ever just a sort of just a gentle movement takes the place of the human condition, the human behavior that is fairly reactionary as a default or as an addiction.
yes, yes. And
Yeah.
it's that kind of effortlessness. He says something lovely. If I can find it, see that it is your experience that everything is free floating in awareness, no matter how delightful, painful, or neutral the situation. It's always so. When that's understood, the situation is always neutral and awareness always delightful.
Yes,
That's
yes. I
lovely.
love that sentence, that idea, that sentence, free floating in awareness feels like, I mean, the image that it comes to me is one of those salt baths where people, I haven't done it. I've heard of people doing it in these salt bath rooms, and they just float in this thing of salt water. But just free floating in awareness feels like it feels like an ecstasy kind of a thing. Yeah.
Yes, it's natural. It happens
Yeah.
naturally, and it's once you realize that effortlessness is your real nature.
Yeah. This there above that was the question that says, what do you mean by going upstream to the source? And then below that, I love what he said just below that, where he says, first of all, the feeling is, or no, he says, it means going from the uncomfortable feeling, we've all had that, whatever it is, to the source in which it appears. So we're not attaching ourselves to the experience or the uncomfortable feeling, but we're going upstream to where it's to where the source in which it appears and out of which it is ultimately made. First of all, the feeling is divested of its psychological content, the I element around which it revolves and upon which it depends. This is accomplished simply by understanding that this I element is in fact non existent. This understanding, this is a key part of this whole paragraph. This understanding is the accomplishing agent. We simply return to this understanding, and the I element is naturally dropped as a result. And that's key. I mean, that if you've ever heard Rupert or Francis, but for me, mostly Rupert, he's always talking about the understanding. Once we have this understanding, all of the other things sort of fall into place.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting what happens to those sorts of feelings, because as he says, you can see it as just a sensation. So if circumstances arise and there's a feeling that comes up in the body, a feeling of upset or unhappiness or anger or whatever it is, um, if you take away the story, which revolves around an I, which is attached to that feeling, then it is just a sensation. And as a sensation, then it can't be a problem. It's never particularly painful. It's just a sensation.
That reference isn't easily accessible for new students to these ideas. Just saying that.
Yeah.
To take and this happened. This question comes up a lot where people go, well, what about pain? Well, the first step in approaching pain or addressing something we call pain, and this would be the thorn to take the thorn away, is that we rename that thing called pain, and we no longer locate it in a body part, but we allow it to just be a sensation that is appearing, and when one does that, it begins to take you on a path of undoing until the undoing is unnecessary.
Yes, but Francis distinguishes between psychological suffering, psychological pain, and physical pain. And mostly what he's talking about here, I think, is the psychological suffering rather than the physical pain, because he does say that the first step with physical pain is to find some physical means of relieving that pain. that you start there. You might not, whatever you do, you won't be able to get rid of it. It will always be there. It's the teaching is not designed. This teaching is not designed to get rid of physical pain, but in fact, it does. It does help, because often physical pain has a psychological element attached to it, a sort of resistance. And then when there's pain in the body, there's resistance which arises in the body, and that's usually in the form of muscle tension. And that muscle tension, because of the way the body works, makes the pain stronger. So if you've let go of that resistance, and the resistance is always around a self, I'm scared because I've got this awful pain and I don't know how to get rid of it, and what can I need to do all these things, what can I do? Once that has gone, and you're just accepting that this is a sensation that has arisen, then that muscle tension tends to go, and that reduces it. So that's something that that I use with migraines, which I know Rupert gets, and he does the same with migraines. You won't get rid of a really bad migraine that way completely, but it's nowhere near as bad.
Wow, that's really good. That's a really great explanation of those differences, and also the practical way of experiencing and differentiating emotional pain from physical pain, and then how that really does come into play in the experience of living in truth, living in an awakened state as best you can. You use these ideas to establish understanding, and then you don't suffer as much, or maybe not at all.
Yeah.
There's a paragraph at the very top of page 25 that is just it stands alone, one little paragraph that was kind of interesting to me. It says, the question was, what do you mean by true emotion? All my emotions feel real. And Francis gave a very short answer for that. True emotion refers to any emotion that does not depend on a separate I, entity, for its existence. Negative emotion always has this apparent separate entity for its foundation. And I felt like this, I felt like he could have answered this a little broader, and maybe this will be a good one to bring when Francis comes in to
Yes.
speak to us. But I just didn't think this was a very broad answer. A negative emotion is the easiest one to identify. It's that subtle emotion that how does one differentiate that like excitement from true emotion?
Well, I think excitement isn't necessarily a negative emotion, and I think it can be a true emotion, just as joy can be a true emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking.
There's all sorts of there's kind of variations which occur during the day in our emotions. Francis is less nowadays anyway. Francis is less keen on using the word emotion or feeling. He says emotion is that which moves. So if I feel, I look out of the window and it's lovely outside. There's a frost on the ground and there's sun, and I feel this impetus to move, to go out for a walk, and there's a kind of excitement which takes me out on a walk, and so that's what I would regard as an example of a true emotion. Yeah.
Right. One that sort of carries you, one that has a pull.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I like that.
It has a pull, but there's no I that that it's pulling. It's yeah.
Yeah. It's just a sort of a movement.
Yes, yes. It's an energy.
Yes.
Yes.
What else do you want to look at here? Is there another particular paragraph or page you would like to look at, Jenny? And
Um,
for anyone that is ask, has a question, we can open up to questions now. And if you have one, raise your hand or type a question on the board, and we'll get to the question.
yes, it's those two questions lower down on page 25. That's Kindle page 22. Is it possible to be enlightened without the mind having any knowledge of it? And the question, I don't feel enlightened or even near enlightenment. And I think those answers are important, because Francis is explaining that the mind doesn't necessarily recognize it, because initially there are no signs of destruction. Now, signs of destruction is not something that we would necessarily associate with the Enlightenment, is it? But I think it's such a beautiful description, because it takes us away from this idea that enlightenment, this amazing mind-blowing experience. What we're looking for is signs of destruction, and the destruction really is the destruction of beliefs, because and the destruction of all beliefs ultimately, because beliefs are at the root of the feeling of separation. And the other sign he mentions is fear and desire, because those two um, emotions are at the root of the feeling of separation. So I think I felt that was quite an important point, the idea of destruction. And then the
Wait, what's funny about that is those that are here that are familiar with the 40-day program that my wife Lisa Natoli created 10 years ago. A lot of people, over 100,000 people, have taken the 40-day program, and it's 40 days, and it's styled after Jesus's 40 days in the desert, in the wilderness, in the desert. And the idea is that you go in the desert for 40 days and you fast from all of your addictive behaviors, your habitual self-sabotaging, and your judgments and your shame and blame and shame and blame and grievances, whatever they are. You fast them for 40 days and you work on this like internal experience. And what mostly happens for about the first week, people are going, "Oh, this is so great. I'm so happy. Yes, this is, and they're all happy, happy, yay, yay." And then about 2 weeks in, the destruction begins and people begin to be unraveled because when the mind at first it's excited about it, but it's not so excited. But when it realizes that a lot of the things that it was valuing are being challenged as not valuable at all and not even helpful. So that this reminds me of that.
yes, yes. And then he goes on to talk about opinions, and opinions really much the same as beliefs. And he says you have to give up everything, not only your opinions but also your life. See how understanding comes about through intelligence. Understanding is always the result of giving up some past opinions. And he gives the example of Einstein discovering the theory of relativity by giving up the ideas from Newtonian mechanics. So that's quite an important point. We often think, well, I don't have to give up all my beliefs because I'll just sort of substitute a slightly changed set of beliefs which correspond to non-duality instead of a few of them. And then I'll keep the ones that are fairly neutral, not causing me too much problem. And then I'll be okay. But it's not really like that.
Well, it's our opinions mostly that keep us, that hold our position in the personal self-identity. It's our opinions that are so important, where we just have to get it out of our mouth. You know what I mean? It's like I have to give my opinion here because it's important that I help this brother or this sister with my opinion. And so what do you do with that? Do you allow the opinion to just be stated and just let it fall where it may? Do you, I mean, there is some sense you seemingly decide what comes out of your mouth, what you, what you, I would say, vomit out, or it's kind of like the send button on your email. You're choosing to press send, or you can listen, you can pause, and you can, and I think awareness, I think true nature is always in the background, either giving a subtle. It's that tiny, instantaneous thing that we don't listen to, or we press send instead of just pausing and rereading it in 5 minutes and going, I can't send that, right?
Yes, I think it depends um, whether you are abiding as your true nature at the time, or whether what you are saying actually comes filtered through a separate self. And I think the ideal is to establish before you say anything. Establish yourself in what you truly are, and then don't edit. Don't think about what you're going to say. Don't edit it at all. You just allow it to flow. And it was quite interesting. The Shankaracharya said something very similar. Don't edit your words. Just allow your words to come from the absolute. You don't edit them. Obviously, with an email, it's a bit different because we're not in front of the person at the time. And I think emails do need editing because words can be ambiguous and can be interpreted in several different ways, some of which not at all what you meant.
Right,
So
right.
you have to be a little bit careful there. But when talking to someone, that's my approach. I try always to start to establish myself as what I am
Hmm.
before the conversation starts, before I meet the person, and that involves establishing that person as being myself as well. So and the whole situation as being myself, and then whatever words flow are fine. But he has a very interesting experiment, which I tried a little bit. He says there's no need to form a philosophy to oppose a belief, the opposite of a system is more or less the same as that which it opposes. For example, communism and capitalism are both related to greed. And I thought that was a very interesting experiment to take some sort of belief or opinion that we have and see whether it is really the same as its opposite. So being in the UK, then I took my views about Brexit, which are not in favour of it, and looked at the opposite and saw how Brexiteers and Remainers, how their beliefs actually come from exactly the same place. It's mostly to do with fear and greed, as in the same way as he points out for capitalism and communism.
Yeah, I mean, I like the approach of just being alert to your own reactions, and I think that's what happens to us when we begin to really understand and give relevance to our maturing in this understanding. Is like I may reply. We're talking about emails. I may begin replying in an email to someone, or I may begin to reply to something I don't agree with my wife or a close friend, and part way into my own reply, awakening will bring alertness to the experience and gently guide the body mind, gently guide Bill out of stepping into quicksand, out of pressing send. Just delete that whole idea. Somehow awakening steps in, and as I'm willing, it will lead me out of my own stepping on my own words, just stepping into quicksand with a situation. And that's been an experience that I've seen happen over and over and over, and even particularly with my wife when we were going through a difficult period of time, and I would watch that happen, and I would watch the experience had a witness, and the witness suddenly would come in and soften the whole exchange, changing everything right there.
Yes. It's going back to what you truly are when you've got lost in whatever reactions or emotions are present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The question at the paragraph at the bottom of page 26, I'm not sure where that is in Kindle. It says, what is the experience of consciousness and where is it recognized? And I think that's a very valid question for people. Francis says, at this moment, you are understanding these words. That you, which is understanding these words right now, is consciousness. It is very simple. From moment to moment, there is presence. This consciousness is always present under all conditions and in all circumstances. You cannot turn it on and off. It is always present in the background of all perceptions and activities. It is what we refer to as I. The problem occurs when we identify this consciousness with a personal entity, a body mind, which is in fact a perceived object. This object is made of memories at the level of thinking and habits or patterns of behavior at the level of feeling and acting. And I love this next line because this is what you were saying a few minutes ago. There is nothing wrong with the body or the mind. The only problem is that we identify our witnessing presence, consciousness, with them.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. We identify the I am, with the belief that's having the reaction,
Yes,
or
yes,
with the belief that has the opinion.
yes. And he says this veil is made of the I thought and the I feeling, the veil that's hiding consciousness. It's made out of that I thought and the I feeling.
Yes. So when we can rest and abide in the I am, when we can just rest and abide as the witness, um, this and what he says after that, he says it is absolute splendor, love, and happiness. However, we have to disentangle consciousness from the body-mind mechanism. That is accomplished by understanding the distinction between the perceived and that which perceives. The body and the mind are perceived. Consciousness is that which perceives all things, all thoughts, all feelings. And when we can learn and then understand that resting or abiding as consciousness, as awareness, and as a witness of the situation, of the experience, that by itself disentangles the is a disentangling mechanism of the I that entangles itself with the body mind experience.
Yes, and beyond the body mind, there's this rather evanescent I thought or I feeling, and you use exactly the same approach. You say, well, what is it that perceives this I thought and this I feeling? And that takes you back to something that is not limited, because the I thought and the I feeling are limited, and often it's located. Often the I feeling is located.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see any. I don't see any questions. I see a lot of commentary from Rick. Rick usually has some really great commentary. Thank you, Rick. Rick says that opinions may exist, but you no longer cherish them. They are just conditioned views without an ounce of personal attachment to them. They are impersonal views.
Yes, yes, they um, they may be views that rely on logic. They may be views that rely on your knowledge of science or something like that. But um, I think what's recognized is that they are all just based on models which are created by the mind, and models are not reality.
Moving to page 28, I don't see any other questions on the board. Oh, Mike King has something. I have taken some of my habits backwards in time and generations. I eat very fast and found that the reason was that my ancestors needed to eat fast to escape persecution. I have found that this habit, as well as other habits or ways of relating beliefs, originally come from love.
Yes, yes. Ultimately, everything comes from from love. So we don't need to worry about habits. We notice them, and in the noticing, if they're habits that are not serving us well, then just the noticing will ultimately get rid of them.
It's almost like when when awareness comes in as as a as a new noticing, a new experience of self-realizing, really, it has a way of shining a light ever so gently, ever so timely on all of the experiences, even experiences that are seeming generational habits that we learn from our parents and their parents and their parents. And I think that's where that Bible verse that got misunderstood for thousands of years that says the sins of the father will be passed on to generations of generations. And I don't think it's really, if you take the word sin and you just call it the habit, the habit of the fathers and the mothers are passed on to generations until something comes in and makes a self-correction, because behaviorally you can't really you can't there's not there you can't find permanence in a behavioral change or modification. It's when something is so strong in desire that says, above all else, or as Rupert would say, come what may, I'm not doing this anymore. And then it establishes a stronger position of determination, I guess you would say. But I think it's really the strength of clarity and certainty comes in and overwhelms the bad habit or the situation, even if it was generational.
Yes, I think there's another way of looking at it too, that if you see your body and mind as being an integral part of the world and no more yours than anyone else's body or mind, it's just what's there, it's what's perceived, then you're witnessing consciousness. It is witnessing all of the interactions that are going on in the world, physical interactions between people and animals, natural interactions like the wind and the trees. You see all of this as a huge complex of threads of happening and threads of a pattern. So there's no my bad habits that I have to get rid of, because none of that exists. It's simply not there. There are threads of a pattern which interact in different ways, and just the seeing of things changes things,
Yes.
and changes not just the reactions of your body mind, but the reactions of other body minds and animal body minds as well.
Right. So do you think collectively, uh, does it appear, Jenny, that consciousness is having a collective effect on itself around the world?
I think consciousness is just playing. I had a lovely conversation. I think it was back in December with Francis, where I was talking about cycles within the world. And you can see economic cycles, you can see cycles of civilizations rising and falling, and then on a much smaller scale, cycles of pattern, cycles of nationalism which rises and falls in countries, cycles of how you bring up your children, whether you allow them complete freedom or whether you are much more restrictive. All of these things I see as patterns and going in cycles. And so I spoke to him about that. And he initially jumped to the conclusion that I was saying what huge numbers of other people have been saying at the moment, particularly spiritual people, that, oh, everything in the world is really bad. We really need the teaching right now because everything is absolutely terrible. And so he said, well, that's nonsense. Don't tell me that it's that it's all terrible now, that civilization is all in a worse mess than it ever has been. It's always been like this, and that was interesting because we were both seeing it at that global level, impersonal level, that we don't see consciousness as being an agent which creates things in the world. There's just a natural movement of consciousness which produces patterns, and a pattern by its nature is going to be cyclic.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I like I like to watch some of the Roman era of the time scale, and when you look at the Romans, oh my God, they were brutal.
They
They
were,
were
yes.
brutal, killers, terrible. So when I look at that when I look at that era of time, and I mean, I think they had to be the beginning of the worst. It was terrible. But when I look at where we are today, we don't see that so much. I mean, yeah, the Afghanistan, the Taliban, and a lot of things that happen in Africa and around the globe, and even in parts of Europe are terrible. But when you look at where we were and where we are, it seems like we're in collectively in a better place consciously. Seems.
Maybe, or it may be that it's just different. I mean, the Romans had some very good technology, and there are all sorts of positive things that came out of the Roman civilization as well. They
Uh,
could have taken them further, maybe even, but
yeah.
yeah.
We have about 3 minutes left. Are there any questions from anyone before we jump into our last little topic? There's a question on the last page that we'll look at today, page 30, that says, I know theoretically that I am love, happiness, and joy, and that everything else is unreal. But this is not actually experienced. I love this is such a typical Francis answer. You cannot claim that you are love, happiness, and joy, and at the same time claim that this is not experienced. If it is not experienced, go to that place that you call I, and don't superimpose the notions of love, happiness, and joy onto it. This place is neutral. Truth is neutral, colorless. This presence is neutral, just like a mirror that allows all pleasant and unpleasant images to be reflected within it. Wasn't that, I mean, I just love that answer.
Yes, yes. There was in a recent satsang, someone said, well, I understand this theoretically, but I don't really experience it. And it's the same question. And Francis said very, very simply, Well, there is no theoretical understanding. Either you understand it or you don't understand it. If you understand it, then you must have experienced it. That was the.
Yeah, he can be kind of curt sometimes, just very direct and
he went on at length to help. I mean, the person hadn't understood, obviously, and he went on at length to help understand afterwards.
Yeah. He says that it is important not to reject the body without welcoming it. Let me cover what he's talking about. Consciousness is transparent. It has no characteristics of its own. It is pure availability. It is the welcoming of all things, your thoughts, the world, and your body, not the concept of the body, but the actual experience of it. So the welcoming of all things, the experiences, everything, that's what you were saying a few minutes ago. It is important not to reject the body without welcoming it. Don't escape from it into thinking. Experience deeply the richness of the body, like the intricacy of an ancient carpet. It is not something you can explore in one moment. Therefore, first discover the truth as this neutral space of openness, of welcoming, and later on you will discover that it manifests as love, happiness, and joy. And then he goes on to talk about the truth is that which is. And that's the beauty of what we're discovering when we kind of open up these dialogues. We're discovering the truth of what is, which is it's the witness that we all experience right now in this moment.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, we've come to the end of our time. And Jenny, do you have any final thoughts before we go?
I think just a couple of sentences from this, actually a little bit further on, page 31, but it's so beautiful, and it does relate to what we've been discussing. Welcome whatever appears in the now from moment to moment. That which comes unexpectedly in the now always comes from grace, from silence. That which comes from silence resonates with silence in us. It reveals silence.
Nice. What a great way to close with that quote from Francis. Thank you, Jenny. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today for this book study, Chapter 2. We'll pick it up next week on page 31 and finish up Chapter 2. And you all have a beautiful week and weekend to come. We bless you and love you, and thank you for being part of this. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Belle.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Jenny.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Belle.
Bill.
So
Thank
good.
you, Bill and Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, hon.
Thank you.
Bye.